Alright, time for the setting time episode. Hey, that's neat. So last time we organised a generic list to go through each topic step by step, so that's what we're going to do. Step 1, we've got to do some research. So the first of my process is obviously research, so the first thing that comes to mind when I think of this word setting time is the artist Salvador Dali and his famous painting, The Persistence of Memory, which depicts a clock melting all around a very surrealistic art form that I felt particularly inspired by. Considering that I was inspired by this, I decided to do some further inspiration into Salvador Dali's work so I could see if I could take any more inspiration from this. I found out that the inspiration for The Persistence of Memory was some cheese melting. I found out that the technique Dali would use to capture his paintings being him sitting down on a chair with a spoon over a copper plate. He would then fall asleep and the resounding crash would then wake him from the brink of his surreal art forms. The final interesting fact that I found about Salvador Dali is the existence of another painting, that being the disintegration of the persistence of memory, which depicts the famous painting being disintegrated into a seemingly molecular level given by the formulaic setting of each block. Another artist I looked into was the Danish-Icelandic artist Oliver Eliasson. He had a very particular piece that I want to explore, which is the Ice Watch London project he made. In this project he sampled multiple glacial pieces from a Greenland fjord and then placed them in various places around London so that people walking by could watch it melt and drain down, thus to promote the effects of global warming and show people just how dangerous it is. Another art form I looked into was the 2010 movie The Clock. This is a 24-hour film and its gimmick was that every minute of the film you'd see a minute from another film which represented that minute in some way. For example, at 7:30 you'd see a man waking up. I did another piece of research into less art-based forms and more science-based forms. I decided to look into self-healing properties, as the idea of having a material that's forever set in a time loop interested me in this concept of setting time. In doing so I learned a lot more about self-healing materials in general, but I could not find any that I could properly replicate without intensive research and material usage that I did not have access to. I did however find some interesting facts about specific materials such as self-healing cutting boards and self-healing concrete, and the ways both of those work. Well, self-healing concrete works by having capsules in the concrete which breaks when it notices a crack and releases cement to fill the cracks. And you also have self-healing cutting boards which work by not actually having you cut through the material but having some small fibers that you end up cutting around the fibers instead of through them, therefore not damaging the board. But now with all this research being done, I began to create quick sketches of my initial ideas and product concepts from this research. I quickly noticed my sketches began to devolve into two different paths, those being ideas relating specifically to telling the time or my clock ideas, as well as my ideas relating to everything else, or more specifically my other ideas. Within the other ideas I came with two major concepts. One of those was a self-healing cutting board, specifically a kitchen cutting board. I had some other quick ideas that I could add to that, such as black marking so you can calculate portions of food easier, a mechanism that could be added to the side which could lift the cutting board and run some cleaning liquid that you could put in a container through it. This idea of the self-healing cutting board I found quite interesting, but I also found it really unrealistic, so I scrapped it really quickly, unlike this second idea which I found much more intriguing. My second and final other idea would be that of some form of kids educational tool that would help with the idea of global warming or some sort. Initially this was a very simple concept. You would have an object through which you'd have to do multiple tasks to achieve a certain goal. And by this I mean you'd have to perform a few tasks like reducing the water level, spinning the windmills to get the main iceberg piece to grow. The issue with this concept was the only problem with the main piece, i.e. the part which would blow up when the child got the right settings. I thought of a few ways around this, either by making the main piece a balloon, foldable origami, or even something that just wasn't at all what it was supposed to be, and it could be like some sort of snow globe feature that lit up and snowed to show the effects of global warming. Now while I still like this idea, I didn't like it nearly as much as the clock ideas I had, which is why I looked more into them now. Seeing as I was interested in the clock ideas, I decided to do some more research into alternative ways of showing off this clock idea and how you could tell time in different ways. And I came across two different items that could do such a thing. One of these clocks is actually from a TV show where the character is suffering from dementia and tries to draw what he thinks is a clock, and it ends up all being like a bunch of spiraled, like melted looking clock, which is an actual product and wouldn't actually be able to tell time, but I did find interesting. Another way of telling the time that I came across was the Color-O clock design, which I particularly liked as it owed no numbers, nothing. It was a completely different way of telling time. These helped me expand upon my initial concepts and helped me come up with 3 new designs for alternative ways to read time. The most simple of which was simply a clock where the numbers moved around the hands, as you can see here. From here I began to move on and move out there with concepts with my spiral light clock, which would show the spiral lighting up as time passes. However, I felt like this was not very easy to read, so I came up with a third concept for showing time, and this was a 12 square lighting system that would slowly fill up with light as time passes, similar to the flow of water. My final design using this line of thinking was my own take on a clock that you'd color. Now, although still use numbers, it was an interesting take in the regard that it was aesthetically pleasing and still simple and easy to read. In the renders you are looking at right now, I pulled a technique to use a green screen material for the clock surface in the 3D modeling in Fusion 360, and then use Photoshop to insert edited pictures and to create a nicer result. Now, all of these really interested me, and I'd probably explore them outside of the project. The most important one to me was my final one, which is based off the 2010 film The Clock, as mentioned earlier, and I really found this one very interesting. The gimmick behind this product, or concept, was how it would connect to either an SD card or your device, and every minute that it displays, it would show a picture taken precisely at that minute. Well, at the time the idea was rough around the edges, I absolutely loved this concept and got to work making multiple different designs for this product. At the same time as doing this, I looked into existing products and found that there was no existing program or product that performed this task to such an intense degree as the example I had come up with. My favorite design was always the first design, which was the simple square shape, which I found the most aesthetically pleasing, although the second design, the alarm clock circular design, was also very nice. However, I find it would be difficult to represent a majority of square images in a circle interface, so I'd have to edit that design slightly. Either way, I quickly got to work modeling these in Fusion 360 and Photoshop like I did with the color clock, and then began to make a few real-life models. I quickly made a crude wooden model so I could represent this idea in real life as opposed to just modeling it again and again. And while the design was obviously very terrible, I still found that it was a good way to visualize it in my head. I attempted to use a vacuum form to make a plastic mold that I could use to create a nicer, more appealing design. However, as I was sanding the edges of this new plastic form, I got it caught in the belt sander and completely destroyed it, therefore ruining the vacuum form and wasting a large amount of plastic. To quickly make a final model, I decided to just laser cut a final piece and then take photos of it that way. Now with these laser cut pieces, I also made some walls to attach so I could slip my phone in the product and then turn my phone on into a green screen shape so I could have a much more cleaner, appealing design, and it helped with the actual glow and luminescent effect that the final product would make, and I found this would made it much more realistic. Anyway, that being said, that's all my research done to the setting time theme. Here I looked into the various forms of being able to show time, but I also looked into a few different ideas of time loops. And finally, most importantly, I came up with an idea that I genuinely find interesting. I might have already decided on my final product, but I guess we'll have to wait until we see the other two themes, such as the next one, setting environments.